Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is an IFBB pro bodybuilder. Today's guest is Chris DiDomenico. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Hey man, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, for sure, man. So I like to start each conversation, each podcast off by asking all of my guests the same two questions. So the first question I have for you, Chris, is who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
I would say my favorite all time is Jay Cutler. I think I really looked up to him. I started looking up to him in college just because that's when I got more and more serious with bodybuilding. And I always admired Jay's what he did in the sport, how he carried himself. Jay's just the best all around everywhere. Even today, he still carries himself like a professional. Outside of Jay, I like Tom Platz back in the 70s, all time old school bodybuilder. I was definitely a big fan of Tom and everything he said. Outside of that, I'd say maybe Kevin LeBron at some point. I was a fan of his physique and how he looked. So I'd say those are a few of my top favorite all time.
Excellent. At what age did you start lifting weights, Chris? And then why did you start lifting weights at that age?
I started lifting weights at 13 years old. I was playing football, high school football, and I just needed to get bigger. I think I was 135 pounds when I started, but that was the reason my Uncle Tony started lifting with me. And we had the old sand-filled plate weights in my stepdad's trailer we used. Then I started training with the team, and I instantly fell in love because I instantly felt like I was getting gains and getting bigger and building muscle. But yeah, that was the reason I started. It was for football. I lifted all through high school. And then after high school was done, I just realized I wasn't going to play football anymore. And so I continued to lift. And in college is when I got into bodybuilding.
Very cool. So before we kind of get into all things bodybuilding, talk to me a little bit about your childhood a little bit more, Chris. So you already mentioned football, but just share with us where you grew up. Talk about the childhood a little bit, maybe some of the other sports, some of the other activities you were involved with up to about high school, and then we'll move on from there.
I grew up, I was a wee little kid, and I played football, I played baseball, I played roller hockey. I had a good bit of friends, but I was definitely really small, and played all the sports, but I don't know, I never really stuck with any of them. I feel old because I can't even remember that young anymore. I don't know, man. I had my select few friends. I was definitely into video games, into movies, those types of things, but I don't really feel that I can remember much change until I got into high school and, started really lifting weights. It's kind of sad, but it just really shows you how much that's basically been the main focal point of my life.
No, it's not sad at all. It's cool, man. But before we get into the weight stuff, your parents, did you have a good relationship with them? What did they kind of teach you or instill in you when you were younger?
I had a very good relationship with my parents. I actually grew up with a single mom, and I lived with my grandparents, and it was a big family. So I was an only child, but I really wasn't an only child at the same time, because I lived with all my uncles. And, it was very not old school, but my grandma kept us in line, and she was strict. And, but it was all like, I learned a lot of respect. I learned hard work from my family. My Uncle Tony was a good athlete, so I always looked up to him. It was a very good upbringing. My family always supported me in bodybuilding. When I first started, it was kind of like, oh, what is this? What are you doing? This is such a weird sport. Like, can we even take this serious? But I did find like instant success in my first couple of shows. I did well. And then, so like they supported it. And then into college, they continued to support it, but it was always kind of like, you're not making any money from this. Do you really want to travel to different states to do these shows? Like, it was kind of then you do well and you win. And it's like, okay, well, we'll continue to support it, that type of thing. But yeah, it's definitely, my family's real big into eating, drinking, that type of thing. So, I mean, bodybuilding is really outside the spectrum of that.
For sure. Makes sense. So, you finish up with high school, and then it sounds like you went to college then, is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Talk about that for a minute.
I went to Slippery Rock University. It's in Pennsylvania. It was about an hour away from where I lived. And like I said, I was done playing high school football. And, when I went there, I continued to lift. I still wanted to get muscle and be big. Bodybuilding wasn't on the spectrum, but I was still fascinated with lifting weights. And as a freshman, within like my first week or two, I met a couple guys that were bodybuilders. And, the one guy, his name's Sam, he right away said like I should get into bodybuilding, I should do a show. And like I was kind of blown away because I really looked up to this guy because he had an impressive physique. And like we instantly became friends. And then like I went and I did the show and did well. And the rest is kind of history. But it was a different time back then, man. It was, you're talking, you're talking almost 15 years. So there was no social media back then. That was right when Facebook started. YouTube wasn't what it is now. Like we were downloading videos off LimeWire, old Ronnie and Jay videos. And like, bodybuilding was very much a cult sport back then. And, that's what appealed to us. Cause like we were weightlifters, bodybuilders. And, it felt like we were like this own cult, and like we weren't in it for the attention back then. We were our own little like kind of private society. And that's what we really liked. So
you're talking about the MySpace days, right, Chris?
yes, that was MySpace, Facebook kind of. That was when MySpace was fading out, and Facebook just started when I got to college.
Me too, man. You and I are probably right around the same age. I graduated high school in '06. What year did you graduate?
I graduated 05.
Okay, well, there we go. We're right around the same age. That's pretty cool. So, what did you study in college, and then did you graduate from college or not?
I did. I went for exercise phys. And I quickly learned that was kind of a waste of my time. And I slacked off in college. I didn't take it serious because I was in the gym, and I never really partied in college. I honestly was just in the gym. And I ended up switching to public health, and I got a degree in that because that offered a little bit more better career opportunities. But I still to this day haven't really used any of those educations. It's kind of funny, but I wouldn't change the whole college thing because that's what shaped me, and I made a lot of good friends, and I think that it was good for that process. But that was the college experience. I finished, it was good.
Excellent. Okay, so let's dive into bodybuilding because that's shaped your adulthood for the most part. So you meet Sam. He says, hey, you should start competing. Why don't you talk about that first show, and what were your thoughts about that when that first show was over? And were you like instantly hooked and decided you're going to just continue to compete? What was your mindset after that first show?
He told me to do a show. The first show I did was the NGA Natural Pittsburgh. And then a week or two later, I did the Mr. Slippery Rock contest, a college held a contest. And I ended up taking first in both of them, like in my classes. And I instantly was like, I thought I was the world's greatest bodybuilder ever. I was 18, and I thought that I was just like the best ever. But yeah, I instantly fell in love. I fell in love with the process. We didn't know what we were doing. We kind of just starved ourselves for 3 months, did tons of cardio, and we lost all of our strength. We lost everything, but like we did get lean, but there was just nothing behind it. And then as soon as the show was over, like, of course we went in and completely splurged, ate everything we could. I put on 20, 30 pounds, like it was nothing. And, then I felt like I was the biggest guy on the planet, like at 185, 190. And, that was kind of it. I felt like I was larger than life in those college days. And that was at like 18, 19. And then I continued to do that in college for like the next basically 4 or 5 years, rinse and repeat, compete, get bigger, compete, get bigger. And, that was the whole experience, man. It was good. And, it was instant. I just instantly fell in love.
Very cool. So talk to me then after you graduate college, was your mindset like, hey, I'm going to I'm going to pursue this bodybuilding thing and be a pro and make money from this? Was that kind of where you were at, or did you have some other thoughts?
But when I always like looked at everything logically, like a step-by-step process. Like when I graduated college, my biggest life goal was to win to Mr. Pittsburgh, because in Pittsburgh and PA, that's basically the biggest show in the area. It's huge. It's in Mannion's backyard. He brings all the big guest posers in, and it's just got a ton of notoriety. And there's a lot of good guys that won that, show that went on to do well. And I graduated 23. And I knew that I had to put on a ton of size. I knew that I had to really get bigger on all levels. I just knew that like winning the Pittsburgh at that time was just like worldly more than where I was. And I was just like, man, I just got to get bigger. I didn't have a coach. I didn't have anything. And I just knew there was so much to do, but that was my main focus at 23, 24, 25-ish. And that's kind of where I was. It wasn't about turning pro. At that point in time, turning pro was like, that was like light years away. The only thing I could think of is winning the Pittsburgh, and like to even think about competing nationally or anything like that was like so far off the grid.
Makes sense. So talk to me about that process of pursuing winning the Pittsburgh. Did you hire a coach? Who was your coach? And talk about that experience as you kind of walked in that direction.
Yeah, so I ended up doing the Pittsburgh. I did an NPC show within a year or two of graduating, and I won my class, the Julie Palmer. And then I was like, okay, well, like I kind of have a little bit of a reason to do the Pittsburgh now. I feel like I was legit. And so I did the Pittsburgh the following year, and I think I got fourth in my class, the heavyweights. And I was upset. I felt like I deserved better. And but I went right back to it. I went right back at it. And that's whenever I was like, okay, well, I need to continue to upgrade. The coach I had at the time was kind of like, just was kind of a waste of my time. And then, so that's whenever I felt like I needed a better coach, a real coach. And I reached out to Mike Eli. That was his name. He was an Ohio coach. And I followed him on social media. I knew some people that trained with him, and he was turning a lot of people pro at the time, like especially women. And I was like, well, if he can turn women pro, like he can get guys to win. And so I reached out to Mike, and we talked. That was Christmas time, 2014. And when we talked, I was like, okay, let's do the Pittsburgh. And then after that, he's like, let's get on and do a national show after, like Junior USA's. And I thought that was like the coolest thing ever, the thought of even competing nationally back then. So I was like, yeah, I'm all in for that. And that's how it started. And long story short, I teamed up with Mike, and I mean, we honestly just blew through both those shows. Like I went in, I won the Pittsburgh, I won the overall there. And then we went down, I did Junior USA's, and I won the overall there, like my first attempt. So that was big. That was exciting. And that was when the first time in my life, after I went to Pittsburgh, the first time I felt like that was the first time I thought about turning pro. Like the moment I won that, I was like, okay, like I can actually visualize, like there's a possibility here that I could turn pro.
Absolutely. So, what was in some of those early shows, once you got connected with Mike, what was like some of the judges' feedback? Obviously you win the Pittsburgh and go down to Junior USA's and stuff. What was some of the feedback from the judges? Was it really positive? And was that kind of a little bit of fuel to the fire of you thinking about maybe, hey, someday I could be a pro?
Yeah. I mean, I won the Pittsburgh, and I won the Pittsburgh pretty handily. So, I mean, I didn't even really get feedback for that, because it was kind of like, I just didn't get feedback. And then I did Junior USA's. Junior USA's at the time was closer. So much more competitive show back then. It's kind of died down the last few years. But I was very symmetrical, and I had good conditioning, and I weighed 207 at the time. And I looked much bigger. Like I beat a super heavy, I won the overall at 207. And so it was just basically like, you look great, you can, you won, but like, you just need more size. So we made the show plan, the goal for the following year to do North Americans. So that would be like a little over a year away. And then long story short, like I basically went into that prep, right? I ended up putting on a lot of size. I put on 15 pounds. I competed at 222 at North Americans the following year. And I thought I was going to go in there and win that. And, especially because like, winning so much, like, I just felt like I was firing on all cylinders, but, that's when I met Chris Bumstead, and he was in my class at North Americans, and he won my class there. There was actually I think there's 3 other guys that have since turned pro at my class. So I ended up getting 6th place at North Americans there. That was like my first pro qualifier. That was a bit of a wake up call. And it's not that I couldn't compete with those guys. It was just so competitive. And, that's when I kind of realized that like, you can't just be good. You have to be great. You have to really stand out above all these guys in order to win at that level.
For sure. So was that a little bit of obviously it was a little bit of an eye-opening experience when you competed at North Americans, but was it a little humbling for you too, or not really? Did it just build your confidence even more?
I think if anything, it really just kind of pissed me off in a way, because I felt like I remember standing on stage and those judges didn't even look at me. And I just felt that like, I don't know. It's just, any competitor knows that when you're on stage and you're not getting looked at, or you're not getting the call outs, or you're not getting the time, like it was just very infuriating. And I thought about everything I put into that show, and I just felt like I deserved more. And, but I kept my mouth shut, and it just was what it was. But that like immediately catapulted me then to the following year. So
why don't you go ahead and talk about the following year then, Chris?
So yeah, that immediately catapulted me. Like it just like set me on fire even more for the following year. And just long story short, that's when I did nationals. I was going to do a show earlier in the year, but I had like a bunch of stuff came up, and financially I couldn't swing it. And so nationals was like my last attempt of the year. And I just went all in on nationals down in Miami. And, I put on another 10 pounds that year. And I went from, I weighed in at 232 for nationals. So like from that to the Pittsburgh 2 years ago, that's 25 pounds I put on. Yeah, man, I just went down there and I smoked nationals. That's when I won the overall there. And, that's when I finally felt like I got what I wanted, got what I deserved, and was very happy with it.
And that was 2017, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So before we talk about your pro debut, I want to talk about training, and I want to talk about Mike for a minute here, because it sounds like he was a pretty big influence in terms of your bodybuilding career. So did Mike kind of adjust your training, or did he kind of teach you how to train better in terms of bodybuilding, or did you already have that foundation before you got connected with Mike?
I think Mike worked out well with me because Mike was old school, and Mike never really overcoached me. And I think that for the first show, like, I came to him, I was out of shape. When you first get a client, you really don't know what's going on with them. I was out of shape, and like, you got to kind of like put them through a prep. And as I came into the prep, like I kind of came into my own, and that's whenever I won the Pittsburgh. And then, so like, that's like when I earned his respect, and he could see my physique. And then it was like, okay, this is what we're working with. And so then he just kind of, he kind of let me do my thing for the most part. And like, he could always see my training footage on social media, and he could see my progress, my check-ins. Like, he knew that I was making tons of progress. So I kind of think of it was our personalities matched up, and he really just didn't need to overcoach me. He just let the tide go, and he kind of steered it in the right direction wherever it needed to be. And that's what I needed at the time. I just needed someone to kind of clean up the fine details of where I was with him.
When you say being overcoached, I've never heard anybody use that terminology before. What does that kind of mean from your perspective?
I think that in today's world, a lot of coaches try and overcoach. And I think that it's because it's such a saturated market that, there's 10,000 coaches out there. And I think that whenever a coach gets an athlete, if they're good, if a coach isn't confident in what they're doing, they're going to sit there and they're going to try and like basically try and find something that they can like coach on that player. And, a lot of times they just end up screwing them up, it's like Tom Brady. Like, I'm not going to come in and necessarily reinvent Tom Brady's throwing. I'm going to sit here and find out like what little like critiques I can do with overall to just fine tune him. But I'm not going to sit there and reinvent Tom Brady. And I think that like with a lot of coaches and clients, like if a coach may not necessarily be confident or like be trying to prove himself, again, they're going to just try and like create stuff to like, oh, well, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And, you know, at the end of the day, if a client looks good, if a client has enormous legs, I'm not going to sit there and critique how the client's training their legs. I don't care what they're doing for their legs. If they're going to keep growing, then by all means, let them grow. You know what I mean? But a lot of coaches will sit there and be like, well, you should be doing this and you should be doing that. And it's just like, you got to kind of just you got to know when to push and when to just let it go. You know what I mean? Like let the momentum go.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I've just never heard that terminology in all these podcasts I've done with bodybuilders and coaches. I've never heard that. And I love that explanation. So then training style, like the nuts and bolts of your training, has that evolved over the years, or is it kind of like pretty similar from the beginning? And what does that look like, Chris?
It's always been somewhat similar. It's always been a lot of high volume mixed with like strength training. And it's always been like, I've always been about, honestly, fundamental training, man. I believe in full range of motion. I don't believe in anything fancy. I still to this day, I don't use wraps, belts, anything like that, because I never felt the need for them. You know, if my knees are bothering me, well, there's something wrong and it needs to be fixed. Same thing with my back and my elbows, that type of thing. I train within my means. And, you know, I've always built my work. Like I played football, I did strength training. So I have all the fundamentals of that. I have all that in there, but, you know, I trained for however many years. I trained for how many years, and I learned how to basically maximize my training to get gains. And, yeah, I just, you know, I believe in old school training, like hard and heavy, but yet, you know, like with good form. I was always big on volume. Like I said, lots of reps, lots of sets. One thing that did change is like, I do work with Matt Jansen now. And since I started with Matt, he has emphasized a lot more recovery, and he's emphasized a lot more basically like, less volume and more like precision, like progressive overload. Like he's a little bit more quality instead of just endless levels of like volume. So, but that's kind of how it's evolved over the years.
Very cool. So why don't we pick up in terms of you turned pro in 2017. Did you take all of 2018 off then?
I did. And
okay.
looking back at it now, that's probably the biggest mistake I feel like I've made to this date. Because I lost all momentum as a pro. Like you're so like this industry, like you're so quick to be yesterday's news. And I never really had a big social media following to begin with. And then by waiting a year, like it was gone. And then I showed up, I did the New York Pro. Like, I just feel like I just lost all my momentum. And to be honest with you, like, I believe in off seasons are just like at some point it's a law of diminishing gains. Like, I just don't feel like I needed that much time. I feel like I got lax in that off season. You know, you stop being as on point and dedicated with your diet, and you kind of just train and eat endlessly. And, you know, I think your gains just start to kind of like become less and less. So that was one thing I would have changed, is I would not have taken that year off.
So once you got done competing in 2019, what was your mindset going forward after that New York Pro appearance? And then what's kind of the plan going forward?
So I did the New York Pro in 2019, and I did put it together. I did feel like I was going to come in much improved. But at the end of the day, I didn't come in with the conditioning I wanted for the New York Pro. I was a bit off, and it's a New York Pro. And I mean, I got crushed. I got 13th. You know, I was happy with the package, like going into it, but I just I didn't peak like I wanted to peak. And I think it was a combination of a lot of things looking back now. Well, actually, no, it was a combination of a lot of things, but I never peaked for that show like I wanted to. And I mean, it's a New York Pro, like there's no room for error there. So I got 13th there. And then that was in May of 2019. And then I went into the off season that year, and I was like, okay, well, it's kind of the same mentality. Well, I'll come back next year and I'll show them. And then a lot of different things happened in my life. I was in a relationship at the time, which ended. I moved back home, and then COVID happened, and then it was just a complete life altering scenario for me. I did get into a new relationship, which is much better, and I'm in a much better situation now. But at the time, it was COVID, and I was training in the basement for 2 months. And 2020 was just a shit show, and there's just no other way of putting it together. And I don't feel like I did much at all that whole year. And admittedly, I was depressed and, a lot of different things. And then, but I still wanted to compete. And I did compete last year. I did the Chicago Pro. It was in the fall, October, November, I believe. But I did a half-ass prep, and I just wasn't mentally in it at all. And I didn't place at that show when I did it. And, I think though that was the whole reason I wanted to do that show, was like, I kind of wanted to just like put myself back into that arena, and like mentally kind of just like wash my mind of all of it, and like kind of get refocused. And that's why as soon as that show was over, that's when I reached out to Matt Jansen, literally the day after the show. And I started working with him then. And, we've had a goal since then. And I feel that although that was a bad show for me, that was a big turning point in my career to direct me to where I'm at now. Now, where I'm at now is when I got with Matt, we did a lot of things. He really focused on my blood work and a lot of the other variables that I was doing at the time to get me healthy and to kind of basically pull me out of the mud that I've sunk into over the years. And, refocused. And then it was just okay, well, then it was let's look at your physique. And he wanted me to add size and all these different spots. And so then we took 2021 off. And simultaneously, I moved to Minnesota with my girlfriend. And, this has been the best off season of my life. When I moved here, I was just under 240. I was around 250, a little bit underneath. And now I'm 285-ish in the morning. So this is the biggest I've ever been. It's the leanest I've ever been. He really got me refocused. And I just feel like I metaphorically climbed back into the box of bodybuilding and did what I need to do. And now I'm ready to compete next year.
So do you guys have kind of a show planned as of right now? Or are you still kind of waiting to see how things are going to unfold next year?
No, we do. We're shooting for July. Right now it would be the Orlando Pro, which is beginning of July. So that's kind of the tentative plan. Now that could change at any time the next couple months, but that's our tentative plan. So I'd start my prep in February. I'm very excited for it.
Very cool. Now going back to that Chicago Pro, that was Nick Walker's pro debut. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Cool. So I want to talk a little bit more about just why you reached out to Matt, and then I want you to talk a little bit more about maybe some of the adjustments that he's made with you, or some of the changes that he's made in terms of how you've done things in the past. So why did you reach out to Matt? And then what you've already talked about, kind of the blood work and a little bit of the training. Is there anything else that he's kind of brought to the table in terms of changes for you personally, Chris?
So I reached out to Matt because the thing with Mike is Mike got me to Mike got me to be a pro. But I feel like me and Mike's relationship kind of just dwindled out, and we turned into being more, we were just friends. And, I admittedly wasn't respecting his opinions anymore or his coaching. And I don't feel like he was putting his maximum effort into me like he once did in the beginning. So I feel like it was a mutual reason. It just wasn't working. And, well, at the same time, even though I crashed and burned hard at that show, I believe I know my true potential as a bodybuilder. I'm a national champion, and I know what I can do as a pro. And I just felt it's now or never. I'm done wasting my time here. And I had always had a relationship with Matt to a degree. Matt, he always followed me on social media. I met him before in person, just a real quick conversation. And, whenever I turned pro and throughout the years, he's kind of messaged me here and there with support. And, so there was that. And also, I just feel like I couldn't beat his body of work. I just feel like what he did with his athletes, it really was the type of coach, the type of following that I wanted. And like I said, I've known people that have worked with him, I spoke highly of him. And I just feel like Matt and me would really kind of click. And I felt that he was the type of guy to really, as a professional, would take me to the next level of being a professional. But yeah, when I started with him, he kind of did a complete analysis of everything, and my training, diet, everything. He put me on a more superior diet right away. Like I just got lazy over time. I was cutting corners with my diet. And then day one, I was like, okay, well, here's a real bodybuilding diet again. And I mean, he's fed me more than anyone's ever fed me, like more protein, more meat. And I mean, I've been on that diet for over a year now. And like I said, he checked my blood work. My blood work was a little messy. And we took the time, like with the health subs and, kind of like having a health phase to get clean, to get healthy, which makes a huge difference. My recovery was shot. Like I was lifting 6 to 7 days a week. And I was just doing that endless volume, just kind of training just to train. And he cleaned that up, put me on a more specific program with the body parts I needed to work. And it was more about recovery. So I don't work out more than 5 days a week now. And then it was honestly having, even my posing as time has gone on and check-ins, being accountable year round to him. And it's the mindset of like, I don't really feel that he's ever really complimented me that much. You send a check-in and it's like, okay, everything looks great, but you need to fix this or work on this, that type of thing. It's kind of funny because I'm the same way with my clients. And I actually, like, by working with him, like I realized how much I am that way with my clients. Where like in time, I'm like, okay, well, you need to compliment this guy a little bit or say something positive. Like you can't just critique him every week in a check-in. But for some guys that works and some guys it doesn't. But I think the other factor too was just the respect factor working with Matt. Whenever you respect your coach, you don't want to let him down. And I just kind of also feel like this is it. It's now or never. Like I'm working with Matt Jansen. I've been a pro a couple years. I'm not getting any younger. Like it's time to do something here. Like kind of put my money where my mouth is, or it's like, what, it's time to wrap it up.
So what is, from your perspective, Chris, what is your potential within professional bodybuilding? Do you see yourself on the Olympia stage? You see yourself within the top 10 of the Olympia? Where's your mind at in that in terms of the future?
It's kind of like when I was an amateur and the only thing I cared about was winning to Mr. Pittsburgh. That's my main mindset right now, is like, I just want to win a pro show, and for me, like I've never even been in a first call it as a pro. I don't really feel, one of the things about working with Matt is I feel as where I am, I feel like I have so much potential as a pro. And I'm not even talking about with this off season. I just feel like the Chris DiDomenico of 3-4 years ago has never been able to transcend his look onto a pro stage. And I feel like by everything Matt's doing, I can do that. And then I feel like on top of it, this off season I've had can kind of put me at the front of a show. I definitely feel like I could be the top 10 at the Olympia. I don't really have a timetable with that. Like I'm really kind of just having a very methodical look, just like I did as an amateur, and realized that like right now I need to win a pro show. And after that, I could look at the next levels, but for like, I look up to Brett Wilkin a lot as a pro. And I kind of like what he's done the last year or two, or well, actually his whole career. Brett Wilkin kind of came out of nowhere and he got second place at the Chicago Pro, and with phenomenal conditioning. And he's not an incredible mass monster. I feel like he has a very attainable physique. He has a very physique, I feel like, similar to mine. We have roughly the same height, the same weight. And if Brett can come from a, basically like a classic physique pro and, get second place at the Chicago Pro, like I can come from being a national champion and win a pro show. Like, I don't think that's far-fetched at all. Like, so that's where I'm at. And, I don't feel like it's cocky. Like, I feel like you have to have that level of confidence and know your potential. And that's where I'm at, man. Like, I'm just going all in with this show. It's taken me some time to get focused again, but I'm there now. And like, I feel like I'm ready to go all in on a show like I did in back was I was an amateur. So I'm excited to see what happens with that. And like I said, once I do that, I feel like, yeah, I could be top 10 at the Olympia one day.
Very cool, man. That's awesome. Now I want to ask you, some of I like to ask a lot of the athletes and even some of the coaches this question, but some of the younger listeners, maybe that are just getting into bodybuilding, maybe they're thinking about competing. Like you said earlier, there's 10,000 coaches out there. Do you suggest, Chris, for people to hire a coach immediately, if they want to compete, or do you think it's okay for them to kind of learn their own body, maybe test a show or two on their own and then hire a coach? What's your perspective on that?
I definitely do think it's good to hire a coach. I would say even from the beginning. I think that you got to kind of know what kind of coach you need though. Like myself, I didn't have a coach until, I competed for, 3, 4, 5 years before I got a coach. I had guys that helped me, but it was kind of like they helped me, like a bunch of people help you put a diet together, that type of thing. But, I largely made all the shots. Having a coach makes a big difference. But I think the problem in today's sport is people want the big coaches, or they want the pretty coaches, the coaches that look pretty on social media, when, a lot of these guys, if they would just listen to the local guy at their gym, they would make gains and that could really propel their career. But they don't want that. Like a lot of people want this level of like Instagram stardom, as a teenager, early 20s. And they think that like hiring a Matt Jansen or, someone big like that as a teenager. But like, I just don't feel that that's for them. I feel that like, if you haven't won an NPC show yet, or, you're not in the NPC, or you're trying to turn nationals, I feel like there's different levels of coaches and you have to just know where you're at. And, like if you're natural and you're trying to do like your first natural show or whatever it may be, like you have to just take time and like realize where I'm at, what type of coach I need, like, and, you can make a lot of progress from there. But yeah, I don't think that it's a good idea to just waste your time to compete and kind of like, because there is a lot of levels to it. It is difficult. There's a lot of signs involved. But like I said, my big thing is just like realize that like, just because there's a guy or girl at your gym that isn't the most famous or like, pretty on social media with their marketing and their followers, they still might be knowledgeable and they still might be able to help you. And that in the beginning phases, that's when it's most crucial. And having someone that can take the time to really talk to you and like put extra effort into you, because if you're working with a big name coach, they only have so much time. And if you're not a top athlete, like it's just common sense, you're not going to get that level of care and tutoring and that type of thing. So like work with someone that can put that level of effort into you, both your training and your mental mindset.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. When did you start coaching, and is that kind of your main source of income up to this point?
Yes, I started coaching back. I've personal trained since I graduated college, and I still personal train to this day. Like now I just do it's completely how much I want. So I just do a few people, and it's completely, how I want, when I want. But yeah, I started doing the online coaching, I'd say probably, around the time that I did the Pittsburgh, which was 6, 7 years ago. And then it just progressed more and more over the years. And then it was actually COVID last year, because I was actually selling insurance. And whenever COVID happened, I lost my insurance job. And that's whenever I was like, you know what, like, screw this. Like, I realized how expendable you are whenever you work for someone. And I was like, you know what, this is stupid for me not to just be doing this coaching full time. And that's whenever I kind of, put more effort into it, and I turned it into a full-time job. And that's what I do now. I'm a full-time online coach. And then I do work part-time at a gym by me, and I do still do personal training on point, but that's just for extra money.
For sure. Do you enjoy doing the in-person personal training? Because that's kind of seems like a thing in the past now with all the online stuff.
I do enjoy it. I enjoy it, well, because it's not like I'm really putting myself out there. I'm trying to sell people. Like anybody I train now is people that essentially have come to me. And I don't, it's my gig. So like, I think there's a respect thing where it's like, they're coming to me for me to train them. So it's really just like, this is 100% how I want. I'm not working for a gym. like doing their sales pitches, doing their training protocols. Like it's all me. And when I think you can train in an environment like that, you can enjoy it, you know. So yeah, I do enjoy it. I do enjoy like really kind of the fundamentals of like the form, the critiquing, the workouts. That's still my favorite part of bodybuilding is the gym and what you do in the gym with the exercises and that type of thing. So yeah, I do enjoy it.
What's something that you've maybe learned about life or learned about yourself, Chris, through whether it's online coaching or personal training in person, but just having those interactions of a coach and an athlete? Is there like some pretty big lesson that you've learned about yourself or life again through those experiences of coaching?
I have learned that I would say, this sounds bad, but I've learned that how can I say this? I've learned how much other people struggle with basic things. I recently posted this thing on my Instagram when I said, how did I turn pro? Like I listened to my coach, I sent my check-ins on time, and I trained really hard. And that's all I did. And I just think that it's amazing to this day that some guys can't send me a check-in on time. Some guys can't fill out a check-in. You know what I mean? I see what guys do in the gym, guys and girls. I see what they do in the gym, and there's just no fire. There's no sense of urgency. And, I think that's one thing that I've learned from it is like, not everyone's going to have the same level that you have. And, I've come across guys that have had it like me, and they're always a pleasure to train, and you really kind of cherish those guys and over the years. But yeah, man, I think that's just something I've learned from it in person is you have to realize that not everyone's on your level, whether it's physically, mentally, or like, what they're willing to sacrifice or do, and so much of a coach is basically like, it's basically kind of just like, I don't want to say downplaying or watering down, but like, coaching these people on the level that they're giving you. Now again, I'm not a top level coach, so I don't sit here and like, people are knocking down my door to work with me. So like there is a point where it's like, yeah, like I'm trying to maintain a client base. So like I do still train people like, if your motivation ain't to be Mr. Olympia, I get it. If you just want to look good in your bathing suits, and that's what we'll do. But like the big thing is just realizing that people are all on a different level.
Right. I want to go back for a second here and talk about something, if you don't mind. You said, you had that breakup in terms of a relationship, and then COVID hit, and you were struggling with some depression. Do you mind just maybe talking about how you kind of mentally worked through that and got yourself out of that, Chris?
Yeah. Like I said, after the New York Pro, I was living with my girlfriend at the time. And, I was training for the next year, and then like we broke up, and then, so I moved back home. And moving back home when you're in your 30s isn't fun at all. I had the support. My family's awesome, but like, it's just not a fun place to be mentally. But I still like kept through it. And, it was an adjustment, but like I was still motivated in the gym. Honestly, I was probably more motivated at that time because I was like, yeah, like, well, now I'm going to get mine this year, and I'm going to go win shows and, do this and that. And then that is ironically, then shortly after I met my current girlfriend, and like I said, things were going good with that, but then COVID hit, and then it was just like, I lost my job, COVID hit. So then there was like months on end, I was just literally sitting at home in my parents' house. And I mean, that just, like, it was just such a weird time, like with everything that happened in 2020, like you can't even shake someone's hand or go out to a restaurant or something. Like, we're training, and like the shows were canceled. I did have 2 or 3 I wanted to do at the time, the Boston Pro, the Indy Pro, like all these shows got canceled. And then it was like, okay, well, screw competing. I'm just going to kind of eat and drink and be merry for a couple months here. And then it was, I don't know, man, it was such a whirlwind of emotions for the whole year. And, like, it was just like, I was training just to train. And that's kind of like whenever I started, I felt like really going downhill because like, I would just go to the gym every day. I was just kind of eating what I wanted. There was just no real direction. And that's why whenever I went into that show prep, or whatever I want to call it, that half-ass show prep, That's why it didn't turn out well, because I just wasn't in the right spot with anything. But by doing the show and kind of like, getting, like, I feel like that's one of the reasons why I did do the show, is because it was like mentally I needed to feel like I accomplished something in 2020, because like I said, I was unemployed, and so I did this show just to kind of feel like, okay, like I did something. And again, even though I lost, it was like, okay, like this is the reset. Now I can start to look on and rebuild for the future.
For sure. Talk about just in general mindset and how important that is for you in terms of bodybuilding, but just in the day-to-day living. Like, do you have like a quote or a mantra or something that you kind of focus on every day to keep moving forward?
I think mindset is everything. I think that even more so than mindset, like it's passion. Like for example, I took a nap this morning after I trained someone, and then I woke up and I had like, X amount of time before this podcast. And the last thing I felt like doing was cooking chicken, and it's just the conversations you have with yourself every day. Like, and that's when you find out like kind of how tough you are, how motivated you are. It's the same thing when your alarm clock goes off. The first thing your mind does is rationalize, like, oh, I don't need to do this cardio, sleep in, or, oh, maybe I can call off work today, or, oh, you know what, instead of cooking all your food, like just order something. Your mind will rationalize every day, and those voices will never go away. Never. They never go away. Like, you have the same conversations. The only thing that ever changes is how you handle the conversations. I think that goes with everything in life. It's the same thing when you look at yourself in the mirror. I still see the 135, 150-pound kid. Like, I'm used to just never being happy with what I see in the mirror. Like, it's never going to be this like, oh, there he is. There's the guy I want to be. Like, there's the supreme athletic build that I'm trying to achieve. But I think life is every day is just a series of conversations you have. And I think that what ultimately dictates how you win the conversation is your overall positioning in life of where you want to be, what you want to do. I think that's the hard thing in life, is I think that you can't really give that to people. You can't really just say like, hey, this is your life plan. This is your goal, because some people don't have that. They don't have a career plan, a hobby, a passion. So they kind of just butter around. But when you have that, when you have a career plan, passion, hobby, that gets you through the hard days. And that's what's going to make all the difference.
100%, man. I love that. Talk to me about bang like a champion. What's that all about?
Bang like a champion is a phrase. I'm glad you brought that up. It's a phrase that whenever I was, before I did the Mr. Pittsburgh, or no, after I did the Mr. Pittsburgh, around 2015-ish, I was living with my best friend, Adam. We lived together for 2 years. And we would work out together. And ironically, we both came out of breakups. We kind of came out of breakups at the time when we moved in together. And, we would have a phrase, or, he would text me or I would text him, and it'd be like, well, what time are we banging tonight? Like, banging the weights. It was our phrase. What time are we banging the weights? And, it would be like, all right, 6, 7. And it would be like, okay, let's bang like champions. It just clicked. It just like, kind of like, let's bang like a champion. And, I started hashtagging it. And then I went and I did North Americans. I did nationals. And then whenever I built up a social media following of people that like followed me, especially when I won the shows, back then, guys and girls that followed me, and then they caught on, and then I started to make the shirts. And once I made the shirts, a lot of people bought them, and I have like a whole social media for it now that I still keep up for the most part today. But it's a very simple phrase, bang like a champion. And what it means is it's supposed to just mean that one, it's supposed to be about being better, and, being better than basically a lot of things today, representing more, being more, representing more. It's also supposed to basically mean that I once put it this way, that if I train hard enough, I can make anything happen. And that's the mentality I had as an amateur. And that's the mentality I have now as a pro, where it's I believe that like every day when I go to the gym and I'm visualizing the workout on the way to the gym, that like I just like, it's like a fantasy land of like all the things I see myself doing and, where I see these workouts taking me. And that's just the mentality behind being like a champion. It's like, if I train hard enough, I can make anything happen. I can be on the Olympia stage one day. You know what I mean? I could win nationals. I could win my pro card. And that's what I've used. And that's what the shirt means. The shirt, the logo itself is me holding the national title. My friend Eddie made it. It's black. And then it's like a cutout of me holding the national title on the, in the main logo. And it kind of came together perfect. Like me and Eddie, we made a YouTube series going into nationals. It was called Only the Best Go Pro. It's still on YouTube today. And like he documented, like made probably 4 or 5 episodes on my prep. And it was kind of like, I don't know. I felt like I just knew at the time I was going to turn pro. Like I just believed it. It's kind of like the whole voices thing, the voices. My mentality back then was, I felt like it was beneath me that I was still an amateur because I felt like I trained harder than anyone. I felt like I lived the lifestyle better than anyone. And it was like, okay, like, let's go win this show and be a pro. So it comes back to the conversations again that I had every day. Every workout was like, okay, let's go ahead and destroy this workout because I was pissed off. I was like, okay, like, let's go get our respect. It was all that mentality. And it's basically everything kind of just put into one thing there.
Cool, man. Did you have a chance to watch or keep an eye on the nationals yesterday or not?
I did. I kept up with it fairly regularly. My buddy Justin O'Donnell, which was on, as you know, was on your podcast. I was really cheering for him. I see he didn't place too well. I haven't talked to him. I'm sure something must have happened. But there's a couple, fellow Matt Jansen athletes that won. Very happy for those guys. Obviously, the super looked good. So yeah, it was a good turnout. It was very competitive this year, man. I really feel like nationals is always just a step above all the other pro qualifiers in terms of like the product of the show they put out there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Justin Shire, one of Matt's athletes, he's been on the podcast, and several of those guys that turned pro have been on the podcast, which is kind of cool. So I want to wrap it up here, Chris. But before we do, I want to talk about, we've had a full conversation. You kind of talked about what your future plans are. Do you have any, mindset in terms of when your competitive career is going to be over, or is that something you never even think about?
No, it's funny you ask that because I do think about that a lot. The last year or two, I started to think about that. Well, I started to think that like, okay, that's when I started to think I only have so much time left. Because once I got into my 30s, it was like, okay, well, I'm not 26 or 27 anymore. It's not like, oh, I'm going to, forever do this. And so, like I said, that was one of the reasons why, like, I reached out to Matt, because it was like, okay, like I've pissed away like 2 years as a pro already. Like, it's time to get serious again and do something with this. Like, I don't know, man. I figure I have anywhere from 5 to 10 years left. I want to, like, I more or less think about what I want to do before I'm done. There's a lot of times I think about quitting. I think that when I say quitting, I mean that like any rational bodybuilder sits and has a conversation with himself of like all the money they spend, all the time that this takes, what they're doing to their body, like physically, the workouts, everything. Like, there ain't a day that goes by that I don't sit and say like, hey man, I love to go sit and hang out at the bar 6 nights a week and eat pizza and Cheetos like every night. You know what I mean? Like, I don't pretend to like enjoy eating chicken, 5 times a day. But like, again, it's the voices in my head that like continue to push on. But like, yeah, man, I think about that all the time. I think that's what brought the sense of urgency back that I needed, to be honest with you.
Cool, man. I want to just give you the platform, Chris, to share any like final thoughts, any final words, anything you'd like to share. And then if people want to connect with you on social media, where can they find you? And then any sponsors, anything like that. The final thoughts, final words are yours.
Well, I just want to thank you, man. Thank you very much for bringing me on here. It's great what you're doing for bodybuilding. Obviously, I want to thank my girlfriend, my family, my coach, my training partners I've had through the years. I don't currently have any sponsors. I don't really have, what was I going to say? I don't really have anything else other than to bang like a champion. Like that's the brand that I created. And that's another reason why I created it. And I'm proud of it because I felt like, that's mine. I own that. So if you want to follow the page, it's just bang like a champion. My personal Instagram is C_DiDomenico. I look forward to, anybody that watches this that follows me. Thank you for still following me and supporting me. I'm sorry I let you guys down the last couple of years, and I look forward to gaining your respect back this next year and kind of fulfilling my true destiny of what I can do in this sport.
Cool, man. You're welcome. And thank you, Chris, so much for sharing a little bit of your story. Okay.
Yes. Thank you, man.
You're welcome. All of you who are tuning into another episode of Behind the Muscle podcast, I just want to say thank you to you. I greatly appreciate you guys. Once again, the Instagram is growing, the YouTube is growing, and that's all because of you. So thank you so much, guys and girls. A few things before we close it out here with Chris. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Super important because of all these episodes that I release each week. I release them first on YouTube, and then I distribute them to the other podcast platforms. So if you want to stay up current on all the latest Behind the Muscle podcast episodes, make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel. Also on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button, go down in the comment section, and please leave some feedback, leave a comment, just leave maybe something you took away from the conversation with Chris. He shared his story, he shared some of his wisdom and his experiences. So just share your favorite part of this conversation. That would be super cool. And then one final thing I'd ask of you guys tuning into this episode of the podcast, take Chris's episode, share it on your Instagram stories. Make sure you tag Chris, tag Behind the Muscle, also tag Bang Like a Champion so that we know that you listened to this episode specifically and found great value in it. I would also appreciate that. And then finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.